mange som er frustrerte over verdenssituasjonen her i dag. Og frustrerte over mangelen på vestlige lederes tafatthet i forhold til hva som foregår i forhold til Israel. Krig er forakt for liv, og å krige mot en sivilbefolkning, det er ensbetydende med folkemord, egentlig. Hvis vi skal gjøre noe med det, så trenger vi alle mer informasjon, og vi må finne ut hvor denne fullstendige forakten for internasjonal lov kommer fra Vesten. Så da begynner vi med Peter fra oss, som er fra Fred og rettferdighet. Det kan vi snakke mer om senere. Og etterpå skal vi ha Kjell Stefansen, som er nestleder i Palestinakomiteen Norge, som har en introduksjon om norsk våpeneksport, og du skal snakke om sionisme. Ja.
Thank you. I'll be talking about Zionism, but I'm going to be doing it in English. And this is just going to be kind of a short history of Zionism as a European colonial project. Now, to understand what we mean by European colonial project, we have to understand what colonialism is, or sometimes referred to as the white man's burden. And a burden is something that you don't want to do. It's a responsibility that you have, but you get no benefit from it. You don't profit from it. But it is your responsibility. And this responsibility for the Europeans, in this case the British, was to spread civilization and to spread, of course, the word of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But the British got no benefit from it. They got no profit from it. It was something that they were responsible to do because it was their burden. It was their burden because they were white. So that's the way many British people looked at it. But another way of looking at colonialism is the extension of one nation's sovereignty over territory that doesn't belong to them. And they could do this either through settlement colonies or exploitation colonies. These are two different methods that we'll get to in a moment. But irrespective of whatever method they used, the indigenous populations had three alternatives. They could either allow themselves to be enslaved, they could leave, or they would be exterminated. There was no fourth alternative. So, where did the Europeans get the right to do this? It came from the Pope. The doctrine of discovery in 1452, the Pope came out with a papal bull, basically a decision by the Pope, that it was the duty of Christian explorers to seize the lands of non-Christians, obviously to get more land for the Catholic Church. Now, this is from 1452, but it is still relevant today. This is not ancient history. The doctrine of discovery was last used in 2005. Right? Not even 20 years ago, the United States Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg cited the doctrine of discovery in the majority decision to prevent Native Americans from regaining some of their territory in New York. 2005. Now, as I mentioned, they had two different methods of running their empire. One was imperial rule, where they would simply install a leader that looked like the indigenous peoples. So in India, they had a lot of Indians that would run or administer the colony for the empire. In North America, as we see, what they would do is use settlement rule, where entire communities would sail over to North America and settle the land, establish themselves. And as we can see here in this colonial map, maps can lie. There's one thing that's missing from this map are the people who lived there, the people to whom the land belonged, Native Americans. thousands of Native American tribes, suffered one of the greatest genocides in human history, brought to you by the British. And the genocide that the British perpetrated in North America was so savage that it inspired even Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler referred to what the British did in his book Mein Kampf, where he wrote, envious of them of course, that they cleared the land and drove out the Aborigines, at the same time establishing settlements which rapidly increased all over the country. We'll get back to that sentiment in a moment, but first a little bit about Zionism itself. In his novel 1984, George Orwell wrote, "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. The past is whatever the records and the memories agree upon." And with that in mind, one could argue, I would argue, that modern state of Israel is basically lies that have been agreed upon in the memories of the Zionists. So where did this lie begin? The lie begins with Alexander Keith in the 1840s. He was a Scottish restorationist minister. He went down to Palestine, came back up to Scotland, and wrote a book where he wrote about a land without a people for a people without a land, meaning, of course, the Jews. A restorationist preacher, somebody who wants to follow the Bible and get Jews back into Palestine. Nathan Birnbaum then coined the term Zionism. Zion is simply just another, or one of many names for Jerusalem. And in the 1860s, he coined this term Zionism, which was then used by Theodor Herzl in his 1896 book, Der Judenstaat, or the Jewish State. And we all know the old tale about the two rabbis who went there and wanted to test this theory, went down to Palestine, sent a telegram back saying the bride is beautiful, but she's already married to another man, meaning the bride, of course, being the land of Palestine, and the other man being, of course, the Palestinian people. Now, this is most probably apocryphal. There is no record of a telegram being sent, but kind of like Wahrheit und Dichtung, poetry and truth. Is there truth to this? Is it really a land that had people? The Zionists, of course, really stood clear with their idea that this was a land without a people. If we were to ask the Palestinians, of course they'd say, yeah, we're here. Let's ask a Zionist.
And we've come back. We've been here before.
2,000 years
and we've
ago.
come back.
2,000 years ago.
Yes. What did we take away from the Arabs when we came back? We didn't want to live with them in peace. We asked them to leave. We didn't accept the partition of Mr. Churchill in 1922 and the partition of the UN in 1947. We didn't say yes. What difference is there between Arabs who were on this side of the Jordan and the other side of the Jordan? Arabs in the East Bank and the west of the border of the West Bank. When were Palestinians born? What was all this area before the First World War? When Britain got the mandate over Palestine, what was Palestine then? Palestine was then the area between the Mediterranean and the Iraqi border.
You say there was no such thing as
East and
Palestinian.
West Bank, no. East and West Bank was Palestine. I'm a Palestinian. From 21 until 48, I carried a Palestinian passport.
But of course, this inconvenient truth didn't bother the Zionists. They kept on with the idea that they're going to take over this land. Now, nothing occurs in a vacuum. It was at the same time that Zionism was being implemented that the Sykes-Picot Agreement came about. And since not everybody knows exactly what the Sykes-Picot Agreement is, I want to play just a short excerpt from a report from The Economist, which explains how the Sykes-Picot Agreement came about.
100 years ago, As war raged in the Middle East, a secret treaty was signed that defined national boundaries and still impacts upon the region today. In 1915, The Economist reported on Sir Mark Sykes' first-hand account of war in the Middle East. The local Arabs were preparing to fight alongside British and French allies to defeat the Ottoman Empire. Away from the fighting, the same British diplomats secretly plotted what would happen next. Mark Sykes and his French counterpart François-Georges Picot agreed to carve up most of the region between the British and the French. The map they created would set the tone for decades of turmoil.
This section here, which largely corresponds to the modern day borders between Syria and Jordan and Syria and Iraq, was drawn with a ruler. I mean, it doesn't take into account local realities, political realities, tribes who have families on both sides of the border.
The Sykes-Picot map marked northern division. To the Arabs, it spelled treachery.
So the background was the British government actually told the Arabs in the region that you will have self-determination after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. But of course, this map was drawn in secret, and they betrayed the Arabs that they fought alongside. In the popular imagination, this is what Sykes-Picot stands for. It stands for imperial colonial borders imposed on the Middle East.
So that's a perfect example of imperial rule, where the British simply installed leaders in these areas, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, except for Palestine. Palestine was not given to the British or the French, it was to remain international. That is, somebody's going to get the mandate to administer it, but we'd wait to see what was going to happen with it. And of course, Britain got that mandate. Why did they leave Palestine open rather than give it simply to the French or the British? Because this is an example of settlement rule. This was all these European Jews coming down to Palestine thanks to Zionism. Now, there weren't that many, but enough where Palestine was left to be decided by this new idea of Zionism. And you can see here in 1917, there was about 6% of the population in Palestine was Jewish. Nevertheless, also in 1917, we have the Balfour Declaration. The Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom decided to support Zionism. Now, the Balfour Declaration had to be put to a vote in the House of Commons. And at the time, there was one Jewish member of the House of Commons, Edwin Montagu. And Edwin Montagu voted against the Balfour Declaration. In fact, he was so much against it that he wrote a memorandum where he articulated his reasons for voting against the Balfour Declaration. And I want to quote a little bit from it because I think his memorandum has proven to be as prescient as it has been forgotten. He wrote, "It seems to be inconceivable that Zionism should be officially recognized by the British government and that Mr. Balfour should be authorized to say that Palestine was to be reconstituted as the national home of the Jewish people. When the Jews are told that Palestine is their national home, every country will immediately desire to get rid of its Jewish citizens. And you will find a population in Palestine driving out its present inhabitants. It is quite true that Palestine plays a large part in Jewish history, but so it does in modern Muslim history, and after the time of the Jews, surely it plays a larger part than any other country in Christian history. The temple may have been in Palestine, but so was the Sermon on the Mount and the crucifixion. I would not deny to Jews in Palestine equal rights to colonization with those who profess other religions, but a religious test of citizenship seems to me to be the only admitted by those who take a bigoted and narrow view of one particular epoch of the history of Palestine and claim for Jews a position to which they are not entitled." And he called this memorandum on the anti-Semitism of the present government. to the one Jew in the House of Commons voting on the Balfour Declaration, he considered the Balfour Declaration itself to be anti-Semitic. But then we go to the idea of getting more and more Jews into Palestine, this idea of settlement rule. And as we can see, the Jewish population grew considerably in the interwar years for obvious reasons. Jews were not wanted in Europe. And many of the Jews here found it a good reason to go down to Palestine itself. In 1945, at the time of 1947, they came up with the General Assembly suggestion, but you can see from this map, the land ownership in Palestine in 1945. In no area of Palestine did Jews own more than 40% of the land, and in most areas, Jews owned less than 20%. Nevertheless, the General Assembly came up with this recommendation. Not to divide the country into two, but actually three parts. The blue part was to be Israel, the yellow part was to remain Palestine, but that white island in the middle was Jerusalem. Jerusalem was to belong to no one, but to be open to everyone. It's an open city administered by the United Nations. That was the recommendation. This was 1947, this General Assembly recommendation. In 1948, Israel declared itself independent. And we can see here, the Jewish population grew a bit. The non-Jewish population suffered what we call the Nakba. And when Israel declared its independence, all these terrible, evil Arab nations, they all ganged up on Israel and attacked Israel. It was terrible. You can see, June 1948, Arab armies invade. Thankfully, Israel had a small army. They could defend themselves a bit. Anyway, we know that's true because it says so right here in the page of the Anti-Defamation League. This is an American Jewish lobby group. And in their page, they write about the day that Israel declared its independence. Despite the euphoria of the moment, Israel faced imminent disaster with an expected invasion by Arab nations who rejected the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. Outnumbered in soldiers and arms, the new Israeli army was attacked from all directions. Somebody should make a film out of this. But of course, the truth is a little bit different. In his seminal work, The Birth of Israel, Myths and Realities, Simon Flapan, who was one of the Israeli new historians, wrote about the background to this war. The overriding issue was the revival of the Hashemite plan for a united Arab kingdom in Greater Syria, ruled by the Hashemites, supported by the British and embracing Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and at least the Arab part of Palestine. Arab governments were aware of Abdallah's contacts with the Jewish Agency and of his expansionist plans. They tried to persuade him to adopt instead a policy of cooperation with the Arab League. These attempts were without success. For Abdallah, the Greater Syria plan was not only a vision, but a concrete political aim to be realized through the efficiency of his own military forces with British and Zionist support. Although Abdallah continued to be an active member of the Arab League, his real relationships with the Arab states and with Israel became the very opposite of the way they were represented. Officially, Israel was the adversary, and the Arab states were his allies. In practice, the roles were reversed. Okay, should we believe Simon Flapan? Let's go to a primary source, the Office of the Historian of the United States Government. This is from May 12, 1948, 2 days before Israel declared its independence. The president said that he called the meeting because he was seriously concerned as to what might happen in Palestine after May 15th. They knew Israel was going to declare independence. British Minister for Colonial Affairs, Sir Arthur Creech Jones, had told him that Abdullah, the King of Transjordan, might enter the Arab portions of Palestine, but that there need be no fear that Abdullah's forces, centered upon the British subsidized and officered Arab Legion, would seek to penetrate Jewish areas of Palestine. Colonel Goldie, an officer of the Arab Legion, how's that for a good Arabic name? Colonel Goldie. Colonel Goldie, an officer of the Arab Legion, suggesting that a deal could be worked out between Abdullah and the Jewish agency, whereby the king would take over the Arab portion of Palestine and leave the Jews in possession of their state in the remainder of that country. He seemed confident on the basis of recent military successes and the prospect of a behind-the-barn deal with Abdullah that they could establish their sovereign state without any necessity for a truce with the Arabs of Palestine, that is, the Palestinians. As if by magic, that's the result of the 1948 war, which was scripted from the beginning. This was just a secret deal between David Ben-Gurion and King Abdullah of Transjordan. Now, once the war was over, this colonist state, the settlement colony of Israel, could do what the British had done in North America. That is, find it again here, cleared the land and drove out the Aborigines, at the same time establishing settlements throughout the country. So that's the British way of colonialism. And we don't have time to go through how Britain kind of lost its empire to the United States, but the United States has taken over. Now, through modern technology, they have a different method of maintaining control. And the method they use, of course, is the United States dollar. Now, the United States dollar is a fiat currency. After 1972, the United States went off the gold standard. There was nothing backing it up. Well, of course, we all know that there's problems now in the American empire, but Adil Rashid, who's a research analyst at the Defense Studies and Analysis in New Delhi, wrote about the implications for the petrodollar system, but he also gave a very interesting short synopsis of what the petrodollar system is and how it came about. Simply put, the petrodollar is the combination of two words, petroleum and the US dollar. Most of the oil traded worldwide today is in US dollars. This arrangement goes back to a 1974 US-Saudi agreement arrived at the end of the Yom Kippur War. According to these agreements, the United States government promised to provide increased economic and military innovation and aid to Saudi Arabia, and in exchange, Riyadh agreed to exclusively price all of its oil in US dollars. Same thing with Norway. Right? Norway, nobody pays Norway in crowns, they in dollars. That's the petrodollar. As far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, they get security support, or the House of Saud gets security support from the United States, thanks to this arrangement. But not just, I mean, of course, there's a cooperation secret for the, nobody's supposed to know this, but of course there's this, secret cooperation between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This is long before the Abraham Accords. So that's Saudi Arabia. Then there's the United Arab Emirates, and this is just recently, of course, they're selling, of course, weapons to United Arab Emirates as well. This is February 1st. This is 5 months into Israel's genocide in Gaza. And we can see that, thanks to the Houthis, there's been trouble trying to get goods in and out of Israel. Well, thanks to imperialism, we have Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates coming to Israel's aid, coming up with a landline so that they can move products in and out of Israel. This overland landline has quickly developed vital importance to Israel, especially with regards to its import and export of perishable goods. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, all taking sides against the Palestinian people and with Israel and the United States. not the people of these countries, but the leadership of these countries, these imperial leaders installed by the imperial ruler, as is, of course, Jordan. Well, this is King Abdullah II. He is the grandson of the King Abdullah who had the secret agreement with David Ben Gurion. And of course, his family had ruled the city of Mecca continuously from the 10th century. So this family comes from Saudi Arabia. So what is a Saudi Arabian family doing in Jordan? Ruling Jordan. They were installed there by the British. Now their allegiance goes to the United States. Why? Well, they get a lot of money from the United States. Now what does this money buy? It buys the ability to send American prisoners, that is basically Muslims, to Jordan to be tortured. It also basically allows Jordan to defend Israel. The recent Iranian retribution attack in Israel, Jordan was there to shoot down a lot of the weapons that were coming, a lot of the missiles coming in from Iran to Israel. Now, what's funny is, amid Iranian criticism, Jordanian leaders have been very clear to portray their action as defensive and in protection of their own sovereignty. It's a very strange kind of sovereignty, when Israel then uses that same airspace to attack Syria. And of course, Egypt. Now, as we all know, the illegal Israeli embargo against Gaza since 2006 could not possibly have been achievable without full Egyptian support, because they control a border to Gaza. Well, thanks to their allegiance to Israel and the United States, Egypt has been destroying tunnels, at least up until the genocide that's going on today. Of course, now things are changing a little bit, albeit a little too late. But again, why does Egypt do this? Because second, really, Afghanistan there was a bit of a extra layer, but Egypt, the amount of money Egypt gets from the United States is pegged to the amount of money Israel gets from the United States. This is a result of the Camp David Accords. And this is what buys Egyptian loyalty to the United States and Israel. So where are we now? Thanks to Zionism, thanks to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is basically just a group of government officials, the working definition of anti-Semitism includes denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, that is, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, which I hope I did a good job of explaining that is a racist endeavor. Over 30 countries have adopted this definition of anti-Semitism, including the EU and, of course, the United States, completely disregarding the voices of many, many Jews around the world who reject Zionism. In fact, Jewish Voice for Peace, which is the fastest growing, largest progressive organization in the United States, has their approach to Zionism in their on their webpage. Very interesting. They say, while it had many strains historically, the Zionism that took hold and stands today is a settler colonial movement establishing an apartheid state where Jews have more rights than others. Because the founding of the State of Israel was based on the idea of a land without a people, Palestinian existence itself is resistance. Jewish people have had a long and integrated histories in the Arab world and North Africa, living among and sharing community, language, and custom with Muslims and Christians for thousands of years. And that, I would suggest, is the way to the future, is that to go back to what we had before, if possible. This is Avi Shlaim. He's one of the Israeli new historians. He's an Oxford professor. And he wrote that in Israel, this is a very controversial notion, the notion of an Arab Jew, because everything is binary. Arab Israeli, Jewish Muslim, Hebrew, but Arabic. We were Arab Jews. We spoke Arabic at home. Our culture was Arab culture. Our friends were Arab friends. There wasn't a real problem about being Jewish in Iraq. Muslim-Jewish relations were a normal, everyday experience. There's nothing exceptional about it. Iraq had a long tradition of religious tolerance. So Iraq did not have a Jewish problem. Europe had a Jewish problem. And Europe simply exported that problem down to Palestine. So whether it be Jews in Iraq, there were, at the time of Israel's declared independence, there were 150,000 Jews in Iraq. And 1/3 of all Baghdad residents were Jewish. Or in Egypt, or even in Palestine, the way forward is to go back to this multicultural existence without apartheid, and in my view, this is me speaking, I think Israel has kind of lost its right to have a state, at least as it's currently orchestrated. But in any case, if there's going to be a future peace, it's going to be based on Jews' desire to achieve redemption and the Palestinians' ability to forgive. Thank you very much.